Hello everyone, I'm Wendell Jones and welcome to the 1040th edition of the program Jones and Company. It is the anniversary of Love 97, the 20th anniversary, and 20 years ago in September of 1994 we started the program Jones and Company with our guest, the Honourable Fred Mitchell. At the time he was not a minister of the government, but he was quite an activist, a political activist at the time, and we thought he was the best guest to start our program in 1994. A lot has gone on since 1994. He's been in the Senate, he's been in the Cabinet. This is the second time as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he is the Member of Parliament for the Foxhill constituency. The Minister is a very busy man, and we thought that let us get him here today so that we can start the next 20 years of Jones and Company, because we've had a good run. Minister, welcome to the program.
Thank you and congratulations. It has been a good run. I was just trying to think what I was doing 20 years ago, but yeah, I was in the Senate then. I was in my second year in the Senate, so it's been 22 years now of continuous time in Parliament. That's been interesting.
I said to you before the show, with the exception of a little salt in your hair, you look the same.
Yeah, right.
But we have enjoyed having you on the program on numerous occasions over the last 20 years. But when we look back 20 years in the development of our country, what do you get, what comes to mind?
Well, I often think that if my mother, who passed away in '99, came back, she would probably find New Providence unrecognizable. So that means there's been a lot of development, a lot of changes, and certainly when she died in '99, the internet wasn't around, so the whole way of doing business and how you approach things, all of that fundamentally changed. What is disturbing, of course, is that no one would have envisaged in 1994 that we would run into the economic problems that we have, and that's really frightened a lot of people. It's undercut our confidence in ourselves, and many people are wondering if we're going to actually get out of it. My own view, of course, is that you have to keep a positive view, and you keep working and you keep chipping away at it, and I think everything is cyclical, so in fact you will rise out of it. But generally speaking, the country's been on an upward trajectory largely for 50 years.
And in those 20 years, we've seen the expansion of media in our country.
Right.
A proliferation of radio stations, to be exact. What has this meant to politics in the Bahamas and to the development of our nation?
Well, I told the younger politicians that one of the ways we've had to adjust is when I started out in 1975, when I joined the PLP, if I wanted to get a statement or announcement out to the public, I simply went to the Broadcasting Corporation and put it on community announcements. There was no television then. There were certainly no private radio stations, and all of those came later, post-1992. So now you have social media. And so what has happened is there's a proliferation of sources of information that people actually go to, and you're not really sure where you go in order to get any announcement out to the public. So that has benefits in terms of the fact that there are all these many voices, and so people are able to express themselves. But it also becomes more difficult to mobilize a population, because the more centralized you have information, sources, and dissemination, the easier it is to get a message out. So that's the neat trick that we have to learn. It's not an uncomfortable thing. It's just something that you have to adjust to, and I think it's a good thing.
When I first met you, you were a journalist many years ago, and we're talking, since this is the anniversary of Love 97, I want to focus a little bit on journalism and to have a person of your skills tell us how we have developed in the country, the journalistic fraternity I'm talking about, and whether or not the public is well served.
My concern is that the papers of record, because notwithstanding social media, my view is that public opinion and public discussion is often driven by the traditional media. So the way I have analyzed things is that generally speaking, people look to the newspapers and the traditional radio stations with the traditional format, radio and television stations like yourselves and ZNS, to a less extent Guardian Radio and NB12, and the Guardian and the Tribune and the Bahama Journal. They look to those newspapers as the institutions that will provide the truth of whatever story exists. So, for example, you may see it on social media, but you won't believe it until you actually see it printed in one of these institutional papers or hear it on their radio or television stations. The problem is that the newspapers of record are now shifting in their marketing strategies toward social media and the down market punch, because they're competing with them for readership. And I think they're forgetting that they have this role of the newspaper of record. And when I say newspaper of record, it means to me 20 years from now, I go to the archives and I can look up the Bahama Journal and say, what were we doing on a particular date? And the journal should reflect accurately the truth of what was happening on that day. To do that, it requires balance. Yes, you can have your editorial position, but balance is important. And I think that that is the underlying thing that disturbs me. I mean, people can have lots of opinions, and you know, social media is a great platform for opinions and for personalities to assert themselves. But I think the central media, the institutionalized media, has to have a sense of balance and a commitment to the truth. And I think that's the ethical platform on which all of this should go forward.
And so are you suggesting then, with social media and with the proliferation of stations, that we are witnessing the dumbing down of media in the country?
Well, I would suggest so, but I don't want to quite say, you know, to sound as if I'm being judgmental about it, because of course in many senses it is what it is. I mean, in a democracy people are free to express themselves as they wish, but there's a certain lack of civility, for example, which comes. I mean, there's certain conversations which we wouldn't repeat in public media before. That's, you know, barroom talk, and that's talk for your bedroom, but not stuff. Now all of that is acceptable. What pictures you publish, for example, dead bodies, people getting shot down in the streets, bleeding, all of it is now fair game because of social media. And before, the institutions were able to guard against that, because an editor like yourself would sit and say, no, that's not acceptable to be put in a public forum. To a certain extent, we've, you know, shifted down, and because the media, even central newspapers or institutionalized newspapers and television and radio, they too have to fight to exist. This is a tough economic climate, and you want people to read your newspaper, and you want people to watch the television. So to a certain extent, I understand the marketing shifts, but I'm saying that there's still a necessity for us to be committed to the truth and committed to balance. And I'm not saying it's F&M truth or PLP truth. I think that both sides, or the DNA or whoever, should have access to these platforms, and as far as possible we just report accurately what the positions are with regard to what happens, and leave the opinion for other pages. 20
years ago we heralded the opening of the airwaves, and for the last 20 years the Free National Movement government then was credited for the opening of the airwaves. I just wonder, in terms of the educational development of our people, whether or not the opening of the airwaves did what it was supposed to do?
I think it has. I think it has encouraged people to speak up, to be less fearful of the consequences of speaking up. It has also positively impacted public policy because it provides a way for people who are running the country to be able to get a sense of what is current and what people are thinking and what their opinions are, and to balance them against the facts as they know them. So I think all of that has been beneficial. What again, of course, is the concerning thing is this rise in the lack of civility in the whole public discussion. Mm-hmm. But again, you will see that I talk to the primary school principals from time to time, and they're saying that you can even see it in the younger ones coming up, that there's this aggression and shortness of wanting to disagree at the slightest thing and to fight and so on and so forth. And that seems to be becoming a part of our culture, which I think we ought to do our best to try and stop or to guard against, because there is a way to have a civil discourse and to disagree. Mm-hmm. I say that the joy and beauty about the House of Assembly is that, you know, people give their ideas vigorously, but, you know, we're not hauling punches at each other. Mm-hmm. You know?
But sometimes I hear that what passes for talk radio amounts to demagoguery. Mm-hmm.
Well, yes, it's because people have a soapbox, and so they know that they can influence public opinion in a particular way, and so they just get on this soapbox and they, you know, begin to attack a particular idea without any regard for the truth. But in a free society, that unfortunately, or, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, is the price we pay for a free society. And I would rather err on that side than to err on the side of restrictions. I'm not in favor of public restrictions. And that is why the neutral platform that I'm talking about is this access point, this question of balance, because I think that everyone has a fair shot, provided you are able to counterbalance what someone says, and that I think is the important.
Yes, but I wonder whether or not you agree that education is taking place, because there are many who bemoan the demagogic kind of utterances that you hear on radio, for instance, and whether true education is taking place. Your government, for instance, is postponing a referendum because people, they say, need to be better educated on some simple issues. On the gaming referendum, there was a whole lot of confusion, and I just wonder whether or not public education is taking place.
Well, I've tried to analyze that phenomenon as well. I had the experience in 2006 as a minister of the government, attempting to sell something which was a perfectly reasonable policy, which was best for the Bahamas. There's no question it would have been best for the Bahamas. We'd have been light years away ahead of ourselves if we had taken that decision back in 2006. But for various reasons, the detractors of the policy were able, on the basis of rumor and innuendo, to simply deflect the population from something which was for their own good. That was an interesting exercise for me, because up to that time it had always been assumed, at least I had assumed, that a minister who's an authority in the country could, with a pointer and a logical argument, I'm simplifying it of course, sell a rational argument. Turns out that's not the case. That's not the case, because the country is awash in rumors. The educational levels are such that you see what the results of the exams are. You know, it's astounding that many people have not been able to pass an 8th grade examination, which is what BJCs are. And so the level of thinking is not where you're at. And so you have to adjust whatever marketing and selling mechanisms you have to deal with that. So there's some of us who are in the category of elites who take advantage of that for their own reasons. And so you saw that with the CSME debate, and then you saw it with national health insurance, you saw it with the referendum on gaming, you see it now with the amendments to the Constitution. And I was just addressing this issue with my branch, and this weekend I'm writing an open letter to the Progressive Liberal Party's women's branch to say to them that it is up to them to seize this issue, because the issue is a simple one. It is about equality for women and men and nothing else. And the problem is that it's been men so far who've been opening their mouths, bad-mouthing the policy and confusing the issue. And it's women who will suffer. I indicated to them, to the branch, that I could be perfectly all right and sit still and do nothing. I'm a man, it doesn't matter to me in that sense, because the law already gives me all of these privileges. The question is whether women should have the same privilege by reason, or should not have the same privileges by reason of an accident of biology. That's the question. The law that's been put before us will amend the Constitution to provide that fact. There are 15,000 more women on the rolls than men. We don't even bother to register to vote. And so you're going to have this Constitution, and women should not allow men to get away with this. Not in 2014. I said, I think, for example, of my mother. My mother, who drove all of us to get our education, our degrees, and so on and so forth, carried our family for 2 years when my father was unemployed. And you're going to tell me, because of an accident of her birth, that she must have less privileges than one of her sons? That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. And no man in this country should be allowed to tell a woman that. Another example, my branch. My branch is run by women. Up to this year, you had no men on the executive. It's all run by women. I went to 7 churches a few Saturdays ago. Except for the man standing at the pulpit, everything else is run by women. And you're going to tell me in 2014 we can argue about whether or not women should have equality and be deflected by foolishness, this anti-women nonsense about it's this and that, when you don't have the courage to simply say, I don't agree with equality for women. If you don't, then come out and say that. Then we know what we're fighting against. But you want to create all this clutter. And that's the issue now. People get deflected too quickly.
I'm sure you're not surprised to know that there are some women who do not believe that the argument is as simple as you make it out to be. And there are some women who feel that their man should have a higher level of rights in the country than they do.
Well, there may be some women who feel that way, but in this society today, that to me is not something that we can afford as a fact. If you want to exercise that as a cultural right, that's fine, you know. But the fact is, in law, everybody should be equal. Now, what you do in terms of your relationship with your husband, that's perfectly fine.
Yes. Isn't this all in compliance with UN conventions?
Well, to a certain extent, it's in compliance with those, but it's more fundamental than that. I mean, it's simply a question of common sense. Common sense. I mean, what is the reality on the ground? Do you remember when the former Prime Minister tried to amend the law with regard to Sunday shopping? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Now, everybody going to the shop on Sunday anyway. Supposedly the door locks at 10 o'clock, but everybody knows the door doesn't lock at all, because if you have the secret wrap, you get into the door and you shop away and nothing happens. So the decision is made to regularize that fact. Oh, everybody's up in arms. We're going to go to hell and damnation and so on and so forth. The law has changed and not one single thing has happened. Nothing. It just goes on as normal.
We have a short time to speak with you today, so I want to take you down 2 other roads, Minister, in terms of our political development over the last 20 years. And over the last 20 years, we have seen many changes. We've seen governments come and governments go. We've seen the loss of some very large political figures in our country. The fathers, you might say, the father of the nation, and the founding fathers of some of them of the Constitution of the Bahamas. And if you were to think about those things, I need you to comment on the kind of political atmosphere that we have had in the country over the last 20 years.
Well, there's a different kind of ethic which came in my view, in 1992. There's a more direct and in-your-face kind of politics which has developed. And perhaps that's a reflection of how the country is. As I said, the principals of the primary schools have been telling me that the kids are that way with one another. This question of civility and how you deal with it. But the thing is, I like the vigor of the politics, the cut and thrust of the politics, because to me that causes better public policy. There's no point in trying to govern a population and that population can't speak up for itself. What is to me an enormous privilege, and sometimes I look out of the window and I keep thinking, I can't believe I actually am doing this, that this is where I am, in the sense that I said to the I think I even said it publicly, but to the Prime Minister, that we're watching all this stuff play out with Andre Rollins, for example, with the PLP, and I said, I wouldn't have missed it for anything in the world. I mean, I'm able to come. I don't have to pay for the seats. I would have paid $50 to sit in the seat and see that. I got to see Brad McCartney and Edison Key slug it out across the floor. I mean, how do you miss this kind of stuff? So it's been good in one sense. But in another sense, we do have to watch this question of civility and how quickly we can get the country mobilized behind objectives.
Yeah, but the quality of the debate, though, I covered Parliament 35 years ago or something such, and you were spellbound when people like Carlton Elisha Francis and Oscar Johnson and people such got to their feet, Paul Adderley and the rest of them. And I just wonder whether or not you can compare the quality of the debate for us. And are we growing? What are we doing?
Well, those people loom large in my imagination. I was a kid when they were all on the stage, and so it's difficult for me to criticize them or to see them in any other thing than giants on the stage. They helped found the modern Bahamas. And so I'm a creature of, or a child of those individuals. And I wouldn't begin to compare myself with them, nor would I compare this era with their era. What I say is our era, and that we act as we act. We can learn and borrow from some of their phrases and actions, but we have the circumstances that we have to deal with, and I think we do the best we can. What I hope is that the younger politicians would learn lessons from what happened in the past, which is why I was saying, even to the population, is people, for example, our party, people say, well, you used to be the enfant terrible yourself, so why are you doing this? Right? Well, I'm in a different position now, and one of the roles I play is the protector of the integrity of the Progressive Liberal Party whenever it is attacked, because that's where I sit, because it's an institution that has to be protected. So what I say to our own party supporters is, look, I know this may not have happened in recent times, but it's happened before, and the organization has survived all of those various things. For example, I was thinking, George Thompson joins the Progressive Liberal Party in 1967 and helps the Progressive Liberal Party win Eleuthera against Mr. Baker. But right before 1967, George Thompson was seeking the nomination for the United Bahamian Party, and they refused to give it to him for various reasons. and he joined cause with the Progressive Liberal Party, joined the PLP, took the nomination, won the seat. 3 years later, what happened? George Thompson joined the dissenters and helped to create the Free National Movement. Now, the PLP went on to survive that. So when you look at Andre Rollins comes from the NDP. He joins up just before the 2012 general election, and a number of others. So you see the same patterns of history working out, and not in the sense of what's going to end up happening, because no one's going to force him out of the Progressive Liberal Party, but in the sense of this, that political parties, no matter how they appear as institutions, whether FNM or PLP, they make alliances with various groups and bodies in order to get political power. And when you have large majorities, those large majorities are inherently unstable. Very difficult to keep them together. Yeah. Mr. Ingram couldn't do it, and Mr. Pindling couldn't do it.
Yes, but Minister, as a political commentator and an analyst, as a journalist, I look at statements made and I measure words, and because words have meanings, and I look at logic too, and I see and I hear illogical statements being made.
Yeah. And, well, the one that gets me is grammar, because I say, for a public figure, if your subjects and verbs don't agree, you lose me immediately.
Yes.
You know, so that's a starting point for me. And I understand the point you're making. I understand the point you're making. But, you know, democracy produces who we have.
Yes, but beyond grammar, I'm talking about when an MP says that, for instance, is against the philosophy of the PLP. That to me is illogical.
Yes.
Because we have real property tax, for instance.
Right.
We have other taxes.
Right.
And so what makes that against the philosophy of the PLP?
Well, again, I don't agree that it's against the philosophy of the PLP, but I would put it more politely and say it's hyperbole, a political license for language when you you know, sort of on the platform. So I'll put it down to that.
Simple as that. Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
There are some people who are concerned that the country is not seeing the transformation, social transformation that we need in our society, and there are a whole lot of people who are concerned about the lack of reform in many areas in our society. Over the hill, in many areas, the same as it was from 1967, and we are looking 20 years on this program. Your government must be concerned about transformation, social transformation, shouldn't it be?
It is, and that's what urban renewal is designed to do. All the programs that when Sir Lyndon did the Commanders of the Social Revolution, all of these were designed to convert that area that has supported the Progressive Liberal Party over the years and tended to be the poorest sections of the community into uplifted areas and where poverty would cease to exist. It's been stubborn. We've got to keep going at it, keep trying to get to the bottom of it, and I think that we're chipping away at it. It's certainly not been as quick as it should be or as successful as it should be, but we know that we have a responsibility to the poor, and we must never stop fighting to eliminate poverty.
You make things happen in the country, I believe, with the institution of proper local government.
Yeah.
When government is closer to the people.
Yeah.
And we've just seen what has happened in Scotland.
Yeah.
But Scotland has had a major form of local government for many years. Why don't we get in a position where we can introduce proper local government in New Providence, for instance, so that the people in your constituency in Foxhill would be responsible for the verges and for the mundane things in your area?
The reason that's always been given is money. that it's expensive to implement. But whoever designed the Local Government Act made it possible for the local government minister to be able to implement the present local government system which exists in the Family Islands in New Providence by order of the minister. And I've been speaking to my colleagues about moving in that direction because I think that's very important. I just recently saw a public meeting in Georgetown, Exuma. Most amazing thing, the local government council there, headed by Mr. Dames, put together a meeting with the Member of Parliament and several ministers, myself, Minister of State Michael Halkitis, and Minister for Sports Danny Johnson. And I counted 300 people in the room. It's the most amazing experience. And I said to them that it's clear that the direction each of the islands will ultimately go in is some form of local assembly, because the country is going to require the local people to have more say over taxation issues, over infrastructural issues, over spending, over planning decisions. That's clear. And New Providence should not be left out of that.
Minister, we're flat out of time, but it's always good to have you here. And I thank you once again for starting the second 20 years of Love 97, the program Jones and Company. And a lot of people get the name of the program confused with the name of the organization. So thank you so very much.
Yeah, I wish you 20 years more. I mean, you know, I've admired your success, and I pray that it continues.
Thank you so very much.